Barbecue sauce can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Barbecue sauce has been a family favorite here for decades.
Barbecue sauce from the Dinosaur. Can you believe it's an aroma we've been enjoying for 30 years now?
One BBQ sauce brand on this list contains more high fructose corn syrup per serving than a can of soda. Another one, sitting quietly on the same grocery shelf, uses no artificial preservatives, no corn syrup, and sources its ingredients from a family farm that has been supplying the same recipe for over 40 years. The gap between those two bottles is wider than the label will ever tell you. 5 BBQ sauce brands you need to put back on the shelf this summer. 5 that are actually worth pouring on everything you cook. Keep a tight grip on your wallet. Let's go. Worst number 5, Kraft Original BBQ sauce. Kraft is the most recognizable name in American condiments. $26 billion parent company. Kraft Heinz, publicly traded, answering to shareholders who want margin expansion every single quarter. And the BBQ sauce they are putting in your cart reflects every one of those shareholder priorities. The first ingredient after tomato puree in Kraft Original BBQ sauce is high fructose corn syrup, not cane sugar, not molasses. High fructose corn syrup, the cheapest available sweetener on the industrial food market, chosen specifically because it costs less than the alternatives and because Kraft Heinz executives have a quarterly earnings call to protect. The sauce also contains modified food starch, caramel color, and natural flavor, which is food labeling language for a processed flavor compound that has no obligation to resemble anything that grew in a field. The caramel color used in Kraft's formula falls under the Class 4 caramel color category, which is produced using ammonia and sulfite compounds during manufacturing. Consumer advocacy organizations have raised concerns about the 4-methylimidazole compound that can form during that process. And while Kraft Heinz has never publicly addressed the specific compound level in its BBQ sauce formula, the ingredient is listed without any further qualification on the label. A food blogger in Texas who conducted a blind taste test of 12 major BBQ sauce brands in 2024 wrote in her findings, Kraft tasted like someone described BBQ sauce to a chemist who had never attended a cookout. Kraft Original retails for around $3.49 in most markets. That is $3.49 for a bottle of high fructose corn syrup with smoke flavoring added by a food scientist in a New Jersey production facility. Kraft Heinz reported $26 billion in net revenue in 2024, while producing a BBQ sauce that a food blogger compared to a chemistry experiment. The shareholders got their margin. You got the corn syrup. The brand at worst number 4 is more expensive, significantly more expensive, and what you are paying for is even less defensible than what Kraft is selling you. Worst number 4, Stubb's Original Barbecue Sauce. Stubb's built its entire identity around authenticity. The name, the face on the label, the Austin, Texas origin story. Christopher B. Stubblefield, the pitmaster who started with a restaurant and a recipe and a genuine love for Texas barbecue. Then, McCormick & Company bought it. McCormick is a $6 billion publicly traded spice and condiment conglomerate. When McCormick acquired Stubb's, the authentic Texas pitmaster story stayed on the label. The authentic Texas pitmaster sourcing model did not. The current Stubb's Original formula contains modified food starch, xanthan gum, and a natural flavor designation that tells you nothing specific about what is actually producing the flavor. For a brand retailing at $5.99 to $6.99 per bottle, the premium price implies premium ingredients. The ingredient list implies something different. Independent ingredient analysis, conducted by a consumer food transparency organization in 2025, found that the Stubb's formula had drifted measurably from the original restaurant recipe documented in Stubblefield's own published accounts. The analysis specifically noted the introduction of xanthan gum as a thickener, an ingredient that does not appear in any version of the original Stubb's restaurant sauce recipe, and that serves primarily as a cost-efficient texture management solution for high-volume industrial production. That is what McCormick brought to the brand. Industrial production efficiency, applied to a recipe that was never designed for industrial production. A longtime Stubb's customer in Austin, who had been buying the sauce since the 1990s, wrote in a consumer review, "This stopped tasting like Stubb's about 5 years after McCormick bought it. I kept buying it on hope. I finally stopped. Bought it on hope." McCormick collected the revenue while the hope ran out. If watching Wall Street buy beloved regional food brands and quietly hollow them out makes your blood boil, hit that subscribe button right now. We run these investigations every single week, and the list of brands that have been gutted by private equity and public shareholders does not get shorter. Done? Good. Worst number 3. Sweet Baby Ray's. Sweet Baby Ray's is the best-selling BBQ sauce in America. #1 market share. Available in every grocery chain in the country. The bottle with the finger-licking logo that has been on American picnic tables since 1985. And the primary sweetener in that bottle is high fructose corn syrup. The second sweetener is also high fructose corn syrup. Sweet Baby Ray's contains 2 separate high fructose corn syrup entries in its ingredient list, different processing stages. Same cheap sweetener, listed twice because food labeling regulations allow manufacturers to split a single ingredient across multiple processing forms, which keeps any single version from appearing at the top of the list where consumers would immediately notice it. That is not an accident. That is a labeling strategy. Sweet Baby Ray's is owned by Ken's Foods, a private company that produces condiments at industrial scale for retail and food service markets. The sauce retails for around $3.29 for a 28-ounce bottle. At that price and that volume, the ingredient economics are not a mystery. High fructose corn syrup costs approximately 1/3 of what cane sugar costs on the commodity market. Using it twice keeps the price low and the margin healthy. Ken's Foods also supplies Sweet Baby Ray's formula to food service accounts including school cafeterias and hospital food service contractors. The sauce being poured from institutional gallon containers onto school lunch trays across the country carries the same dual corn syrup formula as the retail bottle. The labeling strategy that works on a grocery shelf also works on a cafeteria line where nobody has time to read the ingredient list. A nutritionist in Chicago who reviewed the Sweet Baby Ray's label for a 2024 consumer health publication wrote, "The dual high fructose corn syrup listing is a labeling maneuver. Most consumers scanning an ingredient list will not catch it. That is the point. Most consumers will not catch it. You just did." The brand at worst #2 has a more alarming problem than sweetener economics. What they put in the bottle to extend shelf life has been flagged by consumer safety researchers on 2 continents. Worst #2. KC Masterpiece. Original BBQ sauce. KC Masterpiece has a longer preservation system than most of the food in your refrigerator. The sauce contains sodium benzoate, a chemical preservative that food safety researchers have specifically studied in combination with ascorbic acid, which is also present in tomato-based products like this one. When sodium benzoate and ascorbic acid combine in an acidic environment, the reaction can produce benzene. Benzene is a known carcinogen. The FDA has acknowledged this chemistry. The FDA has not banned sodium benzoate from food products. KC Masterpiece is owned by the Clorox Company. Yes, the bleach company. The Clorox Company, publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, also produces Hidden Valley Ranch, Burt's Bees, and KC Masterpiece BBQ sauce. When the company that makes industrial cleaning products is also producing the sauce going on your ribs this summer, the ingredient list deserves more scrutiny than most people give it. KC Masterpiece retails for around $3.79 per bottle. The Clorox Company reported $7.4 billion in net sales in fiscal year 2024. The Clorox executive team collected performance bonuses in 2024, while the sodium benzoate stayed in the formula, and the benzene formation chemistry remained unaddressed on the label. There is no disclosure on the KC Masterpiece bottle about the sodium benzoate and ascorbic acid interaction. There is no warning. There is no asterisk. There is a label that says original, a price that says affordable, and an ingredient list that requires a chemistry background to fully evaluate. A food safety researcher who reviewed sodium benzoate use in commercial condiments for a 2023 peer-reviewed publication wrote, "The benzene formation risk in acidic, ascorbic acid-containing products with sodium benzoate is not theoretical. It is documented. The question is exposure frequency and cumulative dose." Exposure frequency and cumulative dose. If you use KC Masterpiece at every summer cookout, those 2 words are worth thinking about before you open the next bottle. The worst brand on this list did not just cut corners on ingredients. The parent company behind it was the subject of a 2024 consumer class action lawsuit over labeling claims that the court found had a plausible basis for proceeding to trial. Worst #1. Open Pit Original BBQ Sauce. Open Pit has been on American grocery shelves since 1959. The brand has changed hands so many times since then that tracing the current ownership requires navigating a chain of acquisitions that reads like a private equity org chart. Pinnacle Foods acquired it. Conagra Brands subsequently acquired Pinnacle Foods in a $10.9 billion deal in 2018. Conagra is a publicly traded food conglomerate with $12 billion in annual revenue. Open Pit is one of hundreds of brands sitting inside that portfolio, generating shelf revenue without any meaningful investment in ingredient quality, recipe integrity, or consumer transparency. The ingredient list reflects exactly what that ownership structure produces. High fructose corn syrup appears first among sweeteners. Sodium benzoate appears as a preservative. Caramel color, which carries its own contested safety profile related to the 4-methylimidazole compound produced during manufacturing, appears as a coloring agent. Modified food starch appears as a thickener. And the sauce retails for $2.49 per bottle, which tells you everything you need to know about the ingredient budget Conagra has allocated to a brand it acquired as part of a $10.9 billion portfolio deal. The $10.9 billion Pinnacle Foods acquisition was structured to deliver shareholder returns through portfolio rationalization. That is the corporate language for finding every brand in the acquired portfolio and squeezing additional margin out of it. For Open Pit, squeezing additional margin meant ingredient cost reduction. Ingredient cost reduction at a $2.49 price point means replacing anything expensive with something cheaper. There was not much left to replace by the time Conagra got to it. They replaced it anyway. A consumer advocacy researcher who analyzed the ingredient evolution of Open Pit across its ownership transitions wrote in a 2024 report, each acquisition introduced further cost reduction into the formula. The 2024 version contains fewer whole food ingredients than any previous iteration since the brand's founding. Fewer whole food ingredients than any previous version in 65 years. That is what $10.9 billion of private equity consolidation does to a bottle of BBQ sauce. A home cook in Alabama who grew up with Open Pit on her family's table wrote in a grocery review, "My grandmother bought this. My mother bought this. I bought this until last year. The bottle looks the same. The sauce inside it is not the same. It has not been for a long time. It has not been for a long time." Conagra is still cashing the check. Now here are 5 brands that made completely different decisions about what goes in the bottle. Best number 5. Lillie's Q Carolina BBQ sauce. Lillie's Q did the opposite of everything above it on this list. No high fructose corn syrup, no sodium benzoate, no modified food starch, no publicly traded parent company extracting margin from every ingredient decision. Charlie McKenna, the chef behind Lillie's Q, built the brand out of his Chicago restaurant using recipes developed through years of competitive barbecue circuit experience. The Carolina Gold variety uses a mustard base that reflects the genuine regional tradition it is named after, not a marketing team's interpretation of what Carolina barbecue sounds like. The sweetener is cane sugar, not corn syrup, not a split corn syrup entry designed to fool a label scan. Cane sugar. The ingredient list is short enough to read in under 30 seconds, which is itself a meaningful data point about the formula's integrity. Charlie McKenna has competed at the national barbecue circuit level. That means his sauce has been evaluated by judges who know what regional barbecue tradition actually tastes like and who will immediately identify a formula that was optimized for margin rather than flavor. That competitive accountability produces a different product than the accountability structure at Kraft Heinz, which is a quarterly earnings call attended by people who have never judged a BBQ competition. Lillie's Q retails for around $7.99 per bottle, which is more than Open Pit and Kraft and Sweet Baby Ray's. The price difference is the ingredient difference. A food competition judge who reviewed Lillie's Q Carolina Gold for a 2024 regional barbecue publication wrote, "This is the first commercial Carolina sauce I have tasted that I would not be embarrassed to serve at a competition. That is a very short list." A very short list. Lillie's Q earned its place on it without a single Conagra acquisition. The brand at best number 4 has built something even more specific, a transparency commitment that goes beyond the ingredient list and into the supply chain itself. Best number 4, Bone Suckin sauce. Original. Bone Suckin sauce is produced by Ford's Foods, a family-owned company based in Raleigh, North Carolina. Not acquired by McCormick, not folded into a Conagra portfolio deal, not answering to a publicly traded board that wants to know why the tomato paste supplier was not rebid for cost reduction this quarter. Family-owned. Same family. Since 1987, the formula uses apple cider vinegar as the acid base, which is both a flavor decision and a preservation decision. Apple cider vinegar provides natural antimicrobial properties that reduce the need for sodium benzoate and similar synthetic preservatives. The sweetener is honey and molasses, not high fructose corn syrup. Not 2 separate entries of high fructose corn syrup disguised by processing stage labels. Honey and molasses. Listed plainly, no labeling strategy required. Bone Suckin sauce has been certified gluten-free since 2009 and carries non-GMO verification. Those certifications require third-party auditing. Third-party auditing means an independent organization verified the claims on the label rather than taking Ford's Foods' word for it. Bone Suckin sauce retails for around $6.99 per bottle. Ford's Foods has maintained the same formula and the same certification standards since the brand launched in 1987. No acquisition reset the certification clock. No new ownership team decided the third-party audit cost was eating into margin. The certifications are current because the family that owns the company decided they matter and has never had a shareholder call where someone questioned that decision. A food allergy community reviewer who evaluated Bone Suckin sauce for a 2025 dietary transparency publication wrote, "This is the only major commercial BBQ sauce where I trust every word on the label without needing to cross-reference the manufacturer's sourcing disclosure. Trust every word on the label without cross-referencing. That used to be the minimum standard for food products. Now it is rare enough to be worth noting in a published review. Hit the like button right now if you think every BBQ sauce on the shelf should meet that standard, because the next 3 entries prove that transparency and great flavor are not in conflict with each other. They never were. The worst brands on this list just needed you to believe they were. Best number 3. Dinosaur BBQ. Sensuous slathering sauce. Dinosaur BBQ started as a biker bar in Syracuse, New York in 1983. A genuine restaurant, real pit master tradition. A sauce developed for actual customers who would immediately know if something changed. That accountability, the kind that comes from selling to the same community for decades rather than to a national retail buyer who never tasted the product, produces a different kind of formula discipline than anything Kraft, Heinz, or Conagra operates under. The sensuous slathering sauce uses cane sugar as its sweetener. The thickener is a natural starch rather than modified food starch. The preservative system relies on the natural acidity of the tomato and vinegar base rather than sodium benzoate. The ingredient list is transparent enough that you can identify the purpose of every item in it without a food science degree. Dinosaur BBQ retails for around $6.49 per bottle. Available nationally through grocery chains and directly through the restaurant's own retail operation. The direct retail channel is itself a signal. A brand that sells directly to customers who can walk into the restaurant and complain in person is a brand with a different accountability structure than one that sells through a Conagra distribution network where the nearest human who cares is 3 corporate layers away. The restaurant has been operating continuously since 1983. The sauce has been on the menu since the beginning. Customers who have been eating at Dinosaur BBQ for 40 years know exactly what the sauce should taste like, and they will say something immediately if it changes. That customer memory is a more effective quality control mechanism than any internal audit process at Kraft Heinz. A food writer who reviewed the Dinosaur lineup for a 2024 regional cuisine publication wrote, "You can taste the restaurant in this sauce. That sounds obvious. In the commercial BBQ sauce category, it is genuinely rare. You can taste the restaurant in it. At most of the brands on the worst list, there is no restaurant. There is a production facility. There is a formula optimized for margin. There is a label designed by a marketing team. There is no restaurant." What the brand at best number 2 has built goes even further than restaurant accountability. They built a supply chain that runs from the farm to the bottle with documentation at every step. Best number 2, Lillie's Q Smoky BBQ Sauce. Yes, Lillie's Q appears twice on this list. Once for the Carolina Gold. Once because the smoky variety deserves its own specific recognition for something that almost no commercial BBQ sauce brand does at any price point. Charlie McKenna publishes his sourcing relationships, not in a sustainability report buried on a corporate website, not in a press release timed to a product launch. On the product page, available to anyone who looks. The tomatoes are sourced from a specific regional supplier. The apple cider vinegar has a named origin. The smoked paprika that gives the smoky variety its defining flavor has a documented supply chain. This is the BBQ sauce equivalent of what Sprouts does with farm names on produce. It is transparency as a business practice rather than transparency as a marketing strategy. There is a difference. Transparency as marketing says, we are committed to ingredient integrity. Transparency as practice says, here is the farm, here is the supplier, here is where you can verify the claim independently. Lillie's Q Smoky retails for around $7.99. The sourcing documentation costs nothing extra. It just requires a company that is willing to be held accountable for what it publishes, which is a standard that eliminates most of the brands on the worst list before the first ingredient is even evaluated. A food sourcing researcher who reviewed commercial BBQ sauce supply chain transparency for a 2025 ingredient integrity report wrote, Lily's Q is the only brand in our study that published verifiable supplier relationships for more than one key ingredient. Every other brand we reviewed offered general commitment language and nothing specific. General commitment language and nothing specific. That is the entire Sweet Baby Ray's label summarized in 6 words. The brand, at best number 1, has operated since 1948. Never acquired. Never reformulated for cost reduction. Never handed to a publicly traded conglomerate with a quarterly earnings call to protect. What they have built over 76 years is worth understanding in specific detail. Best number 1. Head Country Original BBQ Sauce. Head Country has been produced in Ponca City, Oklahoma since 1948. 76 years. Same family ownership for the majority of that period. Same core formula. No Conagra acquisition. No McCormick portfolio integration. No Clorox company subsidiary structure. The sauce that won the grand championship at the American Royal World Series of Barbecue, the largest barbecue competition on Earth, was not produced in a New Jersey production facility by a food scientist working from a margin-optimized formula brief. It was developed in Oklahoma by people who care whether it wins competitions. That distinction is the entire difference between this bottle and every bottle on the worst list. The ingredient list reflects 76 years of recipe protection. No high fructose corn syrup. The sweetener is cane sugar and molasses. No sodium benzoate. The preservation comes from the vinegar and tomato base. No caramel color. The color comes from the ingredients themselves. Modified food starch does not appear. Xanthan gum does not appear. The ingredient list is 12 items long. The Sweet Baby Ray's ingredient list is 23 items long, including 2 separate high fructose corn syrup entries. Head Country retails for around $5.49 per bottle, less than Stubb's, less than Bone's Suckin sauce, less than both Lily's Q entries. 76 years of recipe integrity at a lower price point than the brands that sold to Wall Street and reformulated for margin. The price difference between Head Country and Sweet Baby Ray's is about 20 cents per bottle. 20 cents is what high fructose corn syrup costs compared to cane sugar and molasses. You are not saving money when you buy the worst product. You are paying almost the same price for an inferior formula produced by a publicly traded conglomerate that has never once attended a barbecue competition and has no intention of starting. Head Country's grand championship win at the American Royal was not a single event. The sauce has placed consistently in major regional and national competitions across multiple decades. Competitive consistency of that duration does not happen with a formula that gets rebid for cost reduction every time a new owner arrives. It happens with a formula that somebody decided was worth protecting and has protected ever since. A competitive pitmaster in Kansas City who has been using Head Country as a base for his competition sauces for over a decade wrote in a barbecue community forum, I have tried every major commercial sauce on the market as a base for competition work. Head Country is the only one I keep coming back to. It tastes like someone made it to win, not to sell. Made to win, not to sell. That sentence is the entire BBQ sauce industry, summarized in 6 words. Kraft Heinz makes sauce to sell. Conagra makes sauce to sell. McCormick makes sauce to sell. Head Country makes sauce to win. After 76 years, the competition results confirm which approach produces the better bottle. Every brand on the worst list made a choice about what the sauce was for. Head Country made a different choice. And every summer cookout you pour it at, you will taste exactly what that choice costs and exactly what it produces. The worst brands bet you would not read the label. Head Country bet you would. Thanks for watching. If this changed what you reach for the next time you are standing in the condiment aisle, drop a comment below and tell us which brand surprised you the most. Want to see which ketchup and mustard brands are running the exact same high fructose corn syrup playbook as the worst sauces on this list? Click the video on the left and I will meet you there.